and your high tide getting up to 2.0. There's going to be your change. So, if you open up this tide book, and it's only April, I suggest still to buy this. By June, July, if you haven't bought it, don't buy it, because you're already halfway through the year. I keep one of these in my house, and I keep one in my truck. And what's nice is, anywhere in the state I can go to in this book. But we go, down here, we go by the St. Petersburg Tide Station, and all we do is we come over to this variable. For you guys that fish up towards Punta Gorda, you go right to the Peace River. Bam, shows you. Bird store, you probably go to Punta Gorda. Placida, okay? And every one of them gives you a variable. We'll do Placida right now. All right? Placida, Gasparilla Sound. High tide's an hour and 20 minutes earlier. Low tide's an hour earlier. Earlier than what? Earlier than what it shows me here on this chart. So today is the 12th of April. So we go to April. April 12th. Low tide was this morning at 1:56, say 2 in the morning. Our low water was an hour earlier at Placida, 1 in the morning. High tide is 6:19 p.m., hour and a half earlier, 4:30. So you go, that's it? That's it. So between 1 in the morning last night, 4:30 in the afternoon this afternoon, I'm going to have, it was a negative 0.3, 3 inches below 0, and it's a 2.2. So I'm going to have 2.5 inches of water movement in a 16, 17, 18 hour period of time. Not a lot of movement. What happens on days like that, it's really a two-tide day, is as we get into these little zones in the middle, it may peak and it may even trickle out a little. Old commercial fishermen call that nip, where it nips back out. But it's never strong enough to hurt you. In other words, that's how I learned everything I know about fishing. I didn't learn anything. Now, all my little tournament skills and tricks and trades, I've learned a lot from Rick since I've become his partner and worked with him closely. Everything I know about the moon and the tide and the mangroves and the water clarity and freshwater, all that, I learned from commercial fishermen, gill netters, that a lot of them are dead now. But they taught me on two tides days, there's going to be a period in there where that tide doesn't do nothing. It actually shows it's still coming in, but it doesn't come in. It actually will nip back out. And then it'll start flooding back in. Back and forth. So what you've got to do is, if you're lucky enough to put a couple days in a row out on the water, when you get into these tides and every graph looks the same for Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, then it starts to change on Saturday. But for 3-4 days in a row, they look the same. You got to pay attention when you're out there. Start putting it up in your head, or get a little book and write it down, what that tide did. I have a set of steps at my boat ramp in Sarasota. I can tell you when the water's at that bottom step, that's a 2.0. I just know. When I get in, when I go out, I can look at the boat ramp steps. I can tell you where the tide is. And then that can tell me where to go. Now, did I learn that instantly? No, sir. Everything I know has been trial and error. A lot of stuff in this Charlotte Harbor, back in the early 2000s, late 1900s, when I first started guiding and really first started fishing. I've only been professional fishing for 10 years. I commercial fished in the 80s. By the end of the 80s, and I'm not ashamed to share this with anyone, I was homeless. And I got my life in order in 1991, and I worked on a roof every day for 11 years. And that's where I learned my work ethics that I apply today in my fishing. By working on a roof with some really special guys in my life. They've taught me about hard work. A lot of guys ask me, how do you get all this stuff? how do you get these sponsors and these jerseys and all this stuff? I said, if you came and worked with me for a day, you'd see. But they all want it right now. Let me have it. Anyway, so I learned about those tides by going out and coming back in and going out and paying attention. Always watching stuff. Little trees, bushes, birds. Why are those birds standing up in there today and the next day they're up in the trees because they can't stand there? And how come when I run down the length of a bar, in one section of that bar, just 100-yard stretch, there's 100 white egrets, and then I get down the same stretch of bar, but further down, same depth of water, and there's no egrets. So I started putting that stuff together. Little did I learn to realize that that little egret colony was eating on something that the fish like to eat on too. And 9 times out of 10, if I worked off that piece of shoreline that the fish couldn't get up on, that those egrets were standing in ankle-deep water, I was catching fish. That's just one other little thing. Rick, it's funny because I put that in my memory bank long before I met Rick, and then I'm down in the Everglades with Rick, and we're going along miles of mangroves. And there's a bunch of trees. Rick calls him the man in the white suit. There's a bunch of trees with nobody. There he is. Maybe 1, maybe 20, but there's the man in the white suit. And then you go on down the way. So I watch him spin around. I go, what are you doing? He goes, man in the white suit, telling me where to fish. We used that when we were out in Texas. We used it in Louisiana. Man in the white suit. Remember that white egret. Not the, what's the one that the Miami Hurricane has? Don't follow the ivy. He ain't too smart. That ivy. Is that right, Rick? Don't follow the ivy. Egret. That's right. See, ivy doesn't eat the same stuff. That white egret, on the shoreline, you find them in the trees. There's going to be fish right there. Will it work every time? Probably not. But I promise you, you start incorporating that into your regiment, and you start treating it like a day's work. All right, now, I'm going to give you another tip. If you're lucky enough, I know some of y'all are retired, maybe laid off, maybe both. Maybe you got a rich wife. Okay. Right? You do? Mama, do you sponsor him? No. All right. Well, anyway. If you will leave your fishing rods at home, drop your trolling motor, pick a shoreline, or get on your push pole, pick a shoreline at low tide, pick a shoreline at high tide, and work the whole length of it with nothing but your coasters on. I promise you, you'll become a better fisherman. And I don't care how many fish you see, how bad you want to go grab that rod. That's why I don't bring them. I don't bring them. When I'm out looking, I leave all my stuff at home. If you will do that, I promise you, you'll come to me and tell me. I have a lot of guys that come to me and tell me, man, that was the best piece of advice you ever could have given me. Leave your fishing rods at home. Pick a shoreline. Pick a little cove. Pick a bay. Pick a set of mangroves. I don't care what it is you want to learn. But if the water's clean, if the water's dirty, I don't fish it anyway. But if that water's clean and you got a good pair of coasters, and I promise you this, I'd rather have a Zebco push-button Snoopy rod and these than this beautiful Shimano rod and none of these. I can't fish without these. I have to see that drop-off. I have to see that color change. I have to see that hole, that edge, that grass, whatever it is. But if you'll leave your rod at home and just go out and work down the tree line, work down the shoreline, and visually pay attention. And then if you're lucky enough to have that nice Humminbird GPS, hit that mark button. If it's an area you don't know. If it's an area you know, remember that tree, remember that blue roof. Remember something. Remember all them white birds. Whatever it is, and I promise you, you can go back there the next day. Stay off it. Don't get in there where you were. Stay off it and throw in there with a jig or a topwater or a gold spoon. You'll catch those fish you saw.